Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, the Conference Board, and Corporate Board Member. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelley Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources and the co-founder and editor-at-large of Corporate Board Member Magazine, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the show. With me today is Doug Chia, who's the Executive Director of the Conference Board Governance Center. Welcome, Doug.
Thanks, TK.
And thank you again. We're filming in your studios here in New York, and we appreciate our relationship with the Conference Board. If you're here, that means we have a sensitive topic to talk about typically, okay? And this one has some sensitivity to it. It's how to handle sensitive but debatable board company disclosures, okay? And there's a lot of places we could go in this, but where I want to start is a real interesting one, and that has to do with sort of CEO health.
Sure.
And the thing that sort of sparked this debate is Marchionne's, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but the CEO of Fiat Chrysler, had a health situation and eventual passing. There wasn't any preempting of that he was sick, and it raised a question about what disclosure board would have, and it raised a second question: what obligation does the CEO have to give disclosure to the board? We saw this with Apple, okay, with Jobs, except he physically was changing, and it raised questions from people that followed, so the board had to address that. That wasn't the case, I guess, in the Fiat Chrysler CEO case. But so how when you think of this, both from a regulatory or a legal disclosure kind of thing by both parties, by the CEO to the board and then the board to the shareholders, where do you come out in all this relative to how a board should be handling it?
Well, it's a tricky situation, as you've pointed out. There really are no regulations that govern this area in terms of CEO health or really anybody's health. And so, the board's in a tough situation because medical privacy is a very sensitive subject, and especially in this country, people don't generally have an obligation to tell their employer anything about their health condition. If they go out, they spend some time in the hospital, they don't have to tell the employer exactly what's going on in terms of what ailment they have. I think in the case of a CEO, it has to be different because clearly this is material information that obviously once the person dies, it's a material event. But leading up to that, I think that there are ways to deal with this contractually. If you look at, sometimes I make the comparison to professional athletes. When a team is hiring an athlete or trading for an athlete, usually it's conditioned on that person passing the physical exam. Obviously, with athletes, you're hiring someone for their physical skills. With the CEO, it's not so much the same thing in terms of what you're hiring them for, but in terms of the procedure, that certainly could be the same, that in order to join the company as CEO, you need to submit to a physical from a company doctor. The President of the United States has always gotten an annual physical by the White House doctor. Same idea. This could be a condition for every CEO, not just people who are, in suspect health, but just make it a routine part of the job. And I don't think that's too objectionable. The other point was, in the case of Fiat, the board said, look, we didn't know anything about what was going on, so we can't report anything, we have no idea. I believe them in terms of the family being very private and the board having no ability to talk to the doctor because of that privacy. And so, the other kind of understanding that could be up front is that the CEO is talking to the independent chair, the lead director, about their health condition when they go into the hospital or something like that, just so the lead director is somewhat aware of what the situation is and can have perhaps some communication with the family or the doctor with the person's consent. So I think there are ways to deal with this.
Okay, so I'm not letting you off the hook.
Yeah.
Because that's the CEO-board relationship.
Sure.
Let's say that they did tell the board that there was a problem, and let's say it wasn't, I'm going to pass away in 2 weeks, okay, but I'm not doing well right now.
Sure.
How does the board handle that when it could have an impact, obviously when the news breaks?
I'd say it's similar to a family situation. If you or I went to the doctor and the doctor said, look, sit down, we need to talk about something, we've discovered this. You would want to go talk to your family about this and then talk about, and then maybe talk to your wife about, well, when's this appropriate time to talk to the kids? What do we tell the outside world? Those kind of things. I think that's the type of discussion that a CEO would have with the board, or at least the chair of the board. And in terms of, so you have that discussion, and then you can have kind of this better feel of what do you tell the investors and when. And so if you look at the cases of Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein, relatively recently coming out and talking about, okay, look, I've been diagnosed with cancer and this is where I am, this is what's going to happen in terms of my treatment, and I'll try to keep you up to date in terms of my health condition. And people have asked at subsequent meetings, well, how are you feeling? And they were able to give some indication, and you would think that they're being truthful. So I think that there's a way to do it without alarming the entire world, and it's really a matter of being very forthcoming and thoughtful about it.
I'm going to give my 2 cents here on the situation with the CEO to the board. I understand the rules and the protections that somebody has, but if you're the CEO, the CFO, or the GC, particularly those 3 positions to me, and you have a situation, you're not supposed to put yourself ahead of the team, okay? You're probably spending thousands and millions of dollars to create a culture that everybody works together as a team or whatever. And to me, in those situations where something like that could affect the team overall or the price of the stock or whatever it is, I think that the right thing to do is for disclosure, okay? And like you said, if handled correctly, there's ways that companies have been very successful in putting that out there. But I really don't, from my perspective, I wouldn't give it a second thought. I think that's the obligation of somebody in that position to inform them that this event potentially could be very significant for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if you establish this type of norm going in, that's the key. Once something happens and the board or the company says, you know what, we really never planned for this situation. We never thought this was going to happen, because it happens very infrequently. So people don't generally prepare for it. But it's just another one of those scenarios that, look, if it happened to another company, it could happen to you. McDonald's, they had 2 CEOs pass away within very quick succession a while ago, and now they've prepared. They have procedures around this. And for other companies to just say, well, that is so unlikely and so remote, we're not really going to have anything for that. I think that's extremely short-sighted.
Yeah. So we have about 60 seconds left. We just talked about one issue, okay, in the disclosure. You have cyber breaches, you have internal investigations, you have all this, all of which puts the board in a position. Some of them, there are requirements around that, or there's stuff coming down the pike related to breaches or related to investigations. But still, most of the time, you have to make a decision within the board. Tremendous challenge, I think, for boards these days. And we only talked about two. You can talk about quarterly, the quarterly earnings, that kind of information to the shareholders. There seems like there's a lot of issues that are disruptive today to a board of directors that forces them to think through these issues.
Yeah, and management is going through this exercise constantly. There's a lot of things that come up on a regular basis that management will huddle together, and they don't really need to go to the board. Or they can tell the board, look, there was this issue, we've dealt with it, we don't think it's a material event, and here's why. So management is constantly doing that with the lawyers in terms of assessing disclosure items and whether they're material, how and when to disclose to the public. But those are, the health thing is the most sensitive thing, because that has this element that none of the other things have in terms of accident at the factory or cyber breach or these types of things.
Yeah, I'm trying to be sensitive to that, but I still get overridden by, I'm the leader of a team and it's important. But we're not going to solve it, but I do appreciate, Doug, whenever I have these tough situations, that you're willing to come on and talk through with me some of the challenges that a board has. So thanks for taking the time.
No, thank you.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, Diligent, PwC, Center for Audit Quality, the Conference Board, and Corporate Board Member. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, Donnelley Financial Solutions, and the Society for Corporate Governance.